You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com.
Hello, welcome back to the TV Obsessive Podcast, episode 39. I am Ryan Kirksey, writer and contributor for TVObsessive.com. I'm joined, as always, by Caemeron Crane, executive editor for the site. He's forgotten all of his Swedish and all of his piano, but he's still here with us today. Caemeron, how you doing?
Pretty good, Ryan. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. We have some people in our episode today that are going through it, but I think I'm doing okay over on this side.
I don't know about you. Did you ever? I've never studied Swedish. I've studied some other foreign languages, but I did try to play piano a little bit. Play trombone in high school, stuff like that. And I was a little bit older. So like
Yeah.
in college, kind of trying to learn piano. You ever try to play piano?
So you and I must be in like alternate universes or something, or we need our lithium pills because so I played piano in elementary school and then gave it up and took up the trombone in
Really?
high school. Yes.
That's fascinating.
So
I wasn't.
I regret giving up the piano. That was something I wish I knew how to do.
I regret giving up trombone. Do you still play at all?
No, never.
No, because like I was pretty good. I was first chair in my high school,
Yeah.
symphonic orchestra or whatever, and then I graduated high school and I just stopped. Like I didn't do
Yeah.
it in college or anything. Um, and no, I've totally lost it now.
Yeah.
But
It's
anyhow,
one of those things doesn't come back anyway. That's our musical history there.
where I was going to go with it is if I could just magically one day be like, I can play piano, I would be stoked. I would be
Definitely.
absolutely stoked. I really
Definitely.
struggled on piano. I really struggled with the fact that you have to do one rhythm with one hand and another rhythm with the other hand. That was the thing that I found
Yeah.
particularly hard as opposed to other instruments I played. Anyhow, hopefully this doesn't feel like spoilers to anyone. We're going to be talking about Constellation episode 4,
Yeah.
now the left hand of God in the latter part of the pod today. Hopefully people are watching the show. We talked about the premiere last week, which was 3 episodes. So you can go back to that
Mhm.
podcast if you missed it. And yeah, but first, as per usual, talk a bit about what caught our eye in the news pertaining to TV this week, that sort of thing, what we've been watching, just sort of chat a bit. Um, so it's March 1st, somehow,
Yeah.
March already. What caught your eye this week, Ryan? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I thought maybe we'd start with just a little bit on Richard Lewis. I mean, clearly
Mm-hmm.
news from a few days ago, his passing. He had, this is someone who had struggled for many years with addictions, but had gotten over that, gotten sober, and but had announced a while back, maybe a year or two ago, that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I think that he actually ended up dying of a heart attack, but had sort of had this a renaissance of sorts as on the cast of Curb Your Enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
He,
Mm-hmm.
he was, I'm sure a lot of people out there have seen Larry David's statement about him. They were born in the same hospital 3 days apart. They've been best friends forever. Sort of one of these things where Larry David, it wasn't like throw him a bone, but it was like, I'm going to help you get back on your feet by putting him on the last 5 or 6 seasons of this show. Maybe even longer. He's probably been on more than
I
that.
think it's longer because I mean, as we've covered, I'm way behind on Curb
Yeah.
Your Enthusiasm. And I remember Richard Lewis being on there
Yeah.
relatively consistently. Maybe not at the very beginning, but I remember watching that show and be like, "Hey, it's Richard Lewis," who in my
Yeah.
mind is a legend. And I want to say a couple of more things about that, but
Yeah. So just to tie that up, and yeah, we should talk a little bit about his earlier career, but he was on this last Sunday's episode.
yeah,
And so it will end up being, of course, the last thing that he appeared on before. I don't know. I presume he recorded other episodes, but it was just very odd. The running thing between him and Larry David in this past episode was him telling Larry how he was going to give him all his money when he died, and Larry didn't want it. Larry said, do
wow,
something else with it. I don't want your money. I think you should do something else with it. He said, no, I've already written it in my will. It's there. So just a very odd sort of connection moment there. But yeah, I say all that to sort of bring up the fact that, yeah, this is a television show, but you could see the connection between those two when they are on screen together. And it's just nice to see him appreciated now for what was a very, very long career. And there'll be a whole generation of people that only know him from Curb and not from his other stuff.
Yeah, right. That was one thing I was going to mention on this, seeing a number of the headlines about his death, mentioning Curb Your Enthusiasm specifically. And I thought to myself, wait, I've known who Richard Lewis is my entire life.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like. I feel like I've known who he is my entire life. Then
Yeah.
I started thinking, like, why? I started wondering what was the first thing with Richard Lewis in it that struck me in my lifetime. Do you know what it was? I had to look into it.
I'm gonna guess Robin Hood Men in Tights.
No.
Okay. That's what it is for me.
Anything But Love.
Oh,
The
okay.
relatively short-lived sitcom. I think it was from like 1989 to 1991 or 92 or something. I think it
Okay.
had 4 seasons, abbreviated first season. I mean, I hardly even remembered the name of the show, but it made an impression on me as a child, basically, starring
Yeah.
Richard Lewis and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, that's right. I did see a tribute from her saying, how wonderful he was, and I didn't realize that's what it was from. Okay.
Yeah, and then of course he's got credits like Men in Tights, and looking at his IMDb, he was in all kinds of stuff a little bit,
Yeah.
And there is a way in which it's like 52 episodes of Anything But Love, some film credits, sprinklings of appearances for one episode on TV shows, and then Curb.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, I guess it is kind of fair that the number of episodes with Curb and the recency and all that was to be mentioned. Yeah, part of
Yeah.
me wants to
Probably
go.
for those that haven't seen him before, it's worth going to revisit some of his stand-up stuff. Very good, very
Oh
good
yeah,
satirical comedian. So yeah, worth revisiting. Very.
I think it was that too. Because particularly when we were younger, there was a period where stand-up comedians got really famous for a
Yes,
minute, beyond what they are now. And Richard Lewis was in that group.
definitely.
Also, for what it's worth, seeing some of this stuff on social media, not just from other big name celebrities, but from just other people,
Yeah.
maybe vaguely associated with the industry. Or I saw a journalist, Ben Collins, posting things. Apparently, he was just like an incredibly kind human being
Yeah.
who would like send text messages to journalists saying like, "Keep up the good work. I love this article was fantastic." Like just kind of out of nowhere, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know, wonderful. So it is a real loss, and
Yeah. No,
RIP.
absolutely. I anticipate we'll have a few more times to catch him as Curb season treks along. So yeah, check that out if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I should probably really catch up on Curb now, or start my alternate plan of just watching this season, which is
Yeah.
probably what I would need to do in order to actually be up to speed by the time it ends. Um, but okay.
A whole host of other things from this week. What other news do we have?
Well, looking at our notes here, I've got a couple of series announcements, and you've got a couple of casting announcements, it looks
Yeah.
like.
So I was confused. So tell me about this Apple TV series because I want to hear about what this is, and I'm gonna tell you why I was confused when I first saw this.
So it was announced the other day that Apple TV Plus is going to continue on their streak of sci-fi television with an adaptation of William Gibson's Neuromancer.
Yeah.
Why were you confused?
I was confused because I misread it at first and thought that this Apple TV series was doing a show called Necromancer, which is a Project Necromancer, which is like the from Star Wars, the cloning secret empire project to bring back, people who have high midichlorian counts, but it's not that. They've not taken over Star Wars. This is from a novel adaptation, as I understand it.
I think the word necromancer predates the Star Wars. Also, by the
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
you're doing magic with the dead. If you're
Yeah.
a necromancer, I think it's in like Dungeons and Dragons, and probably might predate that. But no, William Gibson, Neuromancer. I think this might have been his first novel. Are you familiar with William Gibson?
I'm familiar somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He should get a lot of credit for what we call cyberpunk as a
Uh,
genre. And so the basic plot here involves computer hacking and you know stuff like that. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to it. Prime Video, Amazon adapted his book The Peripheral, and it got canceled
Yes.
after one season. And it was pretty good. I was writing on the first season of that. I don't know. It's also William Gibson is pretty active on social media. So like I might have first encountered this from like him tweeting about it or something like this, you know. And that's cool. I mean, he's just kind of a giant, and there's
Yeah.
I think there are multiple books that tie into this same world. So potentially, if the series is good and successful, it could go on for a while.
Yeah, it looked like this book has won all the major global science fiction awards. So it yeah, has potential as we know from the discussions we've had, Apple TV is the right place for this to land if it's going to be some high quality science fiction. So looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
No, this is a total side note that just occurred to me, and I don't know why. Like in my mind, it's related. Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. There were rumors about them adapting that a couple years ago, and I need to look into whether that is ever going to happen. Probably won't.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't heard
Um,
anything about that.
that
Anything.
the only connection there is in terms of the genre and the science fiction and
I
the
see.
book. There's like a kind of connection in terms of that.
Well,
The
speaking of
other
folks,
one,
yes, folks who do other folks who do genre things, we've talked before about the Benioff and Weiss project that's coming
yeah,
to I think it's coming to
Netflix.
Netflix.
Yeah,
That
they've
is
got like a deal
about,
with Netflix. They got like an
yeah,
overall
they
deal
have
with
this
Netflix.
overarch, obviously they're charged with Three Body Problem coming now in less than a month. They've got an overall deal with them. And one of the things they're doing is this Death by Lightning project about President James Garfield and the person who became infatuated with him and ended up killing him. We've talked about how it already has Michael Shannon, Matthew McFadden from Succession. Now they've got Betty Gilpin, fresh off of Miss Davis, Nick
Yeah.
Offerman, fresh off an Emmy from his Last of Us appearance, and various other things. So this is becoming more and more interesting every day.
I'm getting pretty excited.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting pretty close to maximally excited based just on the cast.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess assassination of James Garfield, this is potentially interesting material, but
Yes.
you know, I'm more sitting here like, really?
Yeah.
I bet he because you know, as we talked about, I was just watching Mrs. Davis and she was wonderful in that, and that show was great. And of course, Nick Offerman is great in everything, and Michael Shannon is great in everything, and then Matthew McFadden.
You
I'm
know, I
in.
just want to say also, this is I mean, this is an incredible cast. There's no doubt about it that I'll be watching this now when it comes out, regardless of what the subject matter is. But good for Benioff and Weiss, where you can be just like universally panned for something you did, and then have this kind of bounce back 5 or 6 years later. I mean, good for them to be able to get this kind of deal done.
Yeah. One thing I am wondering, given these casting announcements, looking at these names, thinking about these names, I know the show's based on a book and I haven't read the book.
Yeah,
And of course, it's based on history, which I have some familiar. Is it going to be funny?
that's a
Like,
great
just
question.
looking at this cast, I have the feel like this is going to be funny, isn't it?
That's a great question because we have the potential of these top four headliners to be incredibly funny.
Yeah, I'm not saying like, is it going to be a comedy? I don't think it's
Yeah.
going to be a comedy. No, it's going to be a drama and so on and so forth. But man, if there's not some humor for these people to play with,
Yeah.
no, using their talents to the max, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't
Even
know. I'm really looking.
in all the casting announcements that came out this week, this one I think piqued my interest the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other one you got was Only Murders in the Building, right? More
Yeah,
big name.
they keep growing the cast of this show, and obviously it's wildly popular now. So in addition to I think Meryl Streep being added in season 3, they've now added Ava Longoria and Eugene Levy for season 4. So I mean, yeah, I want to talk about a cast of comedians. I mean, I haven't seen too much of what Eva Longoria has been in. I wasn't really a Desperate Housewives fan, but obviously she
Yeah.
is universally known. Eugene Levy, right off of Schitt's Creek. I mean, just genius. So this is
Well, and
this is a good name.
I should have looked into this to refresh my memory. Maybe you remember better than I do. But thinking about Martin Short, Steve Martin, Eugene Levy, ha these guys have known each other for a while, haven't they? Don't they like have connections early in their comedic roots?
Yeah, I want to say that at least Short and Levy were in that famous Canadian improv group.
The
I don't
SCTV
recall what the name was. It from
or
CCTV. Yeah.
yeah,
But I think I have that. I think I have that right. Yeah.
we should have looked into this before we were recording.
Yeah.
If I was
Well,
going to mention it, I should have.
that's what it was
Apologies.
for. But
Um, but I mean, whatever they may have done together or not done together, certainly this is another name who has a long and kind of storied career as a comedian.
yeah, so it does. And when we say long story, so it looks like they have been friends and working together. Eugene Levy, Martin Short, and Gilda Radner
Oh yeah,
teamed up together in Toronto the first time in 1972. So they were been working together since then.
yeah. So it should be good.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Should be good. The other thing that caught my eye, there's some other stuff. Did you ever watch Ray Donovan?
No, I've never seen Ray Donovan. This is Dad TV, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think so. I'm going to be honest. I never watched Ray Donovan either. I kind of thought about watching Ray Donovan. You know, it's
Yeah.
one of those things that's kind of right there where it feels like this is probably pretty entertaining. It's on Showtime and it's Lee Schreiber. Anyway, um, they're going to do a spin-off series. And part of why it caught my eye is some of the names involved, including Guy Ritchie, we were talking about last week.
Yeah, we just
Um,
talked about him.
and so I don't know. I thought this was worth mentioning. Perhaps some people listening will be more excited than we are since we're not fans of the show. We do have some articles on TVObscast.com on Ray Donovan, for what it's worth. Brad Dukes hopped in and wrote some articles on
What
Ray Donovan.
sense do you get, or I don't know if which is something we should look at as well, like how involved Guy Ritchie is in this production? It seemed to be he was heavily involved in the one we talked about last week, The Gentleman. And he's also involved in some other things. So, it's kind of like, is this one of the things where you're lending your name to this, or you are executive producing and just consulting from time to time? I wonder how he can spread his time across all this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if he's terribly involved with this one.
Yeah.
I'm more wanting to mention it because I know that Ray Donovan has a fan base. It was kind
Mhm.
of, as I recall, unceremoniously canceled and people were upset, and then they brought it back with a movie to wrap it up or something. Now you got the spin-off
Yes.
series. The other thing that caught my eye was the exec in the article saying that this quote was from maybe last year, but talking about leaning into their brands like Ray Donovan and maybe they'll do more Dexter. I don't know how they'll do more Dexter. I honestly don't know how they would do more Dexter at this point.
I start this is a side, obviously, but I started Dexter and then had so many people tell me that it ended so badly that I stopped watching it. So I never made it to the end of that bad last season.
Good plan. Well, but then they did reboot Dexter.
Right,
Like a couple
right.
years ago. They did Dexter New Blood. And I guess I don't want to jump into spoiler territory of how it ends, but if you know how it ends, like I don't know how they do more Dexter at this point.
Okay.
Uh,
Fair enough.
so
Fair
I
enough.
mean, there are ways. There's always a way, but
Well, Liv Schreiber can just do
comment.
Ray Donovan and narrate Hard Knocks for the rest of his life, and I think people would keep watching it.
Yeah, interesting career from that guy.
Yeah.
So I remember he first caught my eye in some like indie films in the late 1990s,
Yeah.
and now he's the voice of Hard Knocks. Okay, all right. All right. Well, so what else do we got this week? What have we been watching besides Curb? You can talk about Curb more if you want to.
Yeah, no. Just Curve continues to be incredible. Larry David had to go to marriage counseling this week, which was just, I mean, again, every week I just keep saying when when I don't think it can get any better. Just Larry David and Marriage Counseling is absolute instant iconic.
Yeah.
So please check that out this season. And then, did you watch the first two episodes of Shogun that came out this week?
Oh, I almost did, but I did not. I actively thought about it. I saw it on Hulu when I was watching The Floor,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, maybe after I'm done watching The Floor, I'll watch Shogun. And then I don't know, it got kind of late and I didn't. You
Yeah,
did?
so I am halfway through the second episode. It's a lift because the two episodes together are well over 2 hours if you watch them. But man, the first episode was, I thought, incredible. I mean, I don't know much about this time period in history, but it was just the perfect balance of telling you things at the pace you need to know them, introducing characters in a way where you get to understand who they are, what they do, what their motivations are, without just, I mean, this is a broad and wide cast of characters here. They just, the pace through the first episode and a half is extremely good. The guy who's the British sailor who crashes in Japan. This is not a spoiler. This is just sort of the base of the story. Whose name is Cosmo Jarvis. That's the actor's name. He's phenomenal. I don't know what I've seen him in this, but he is incredible. And he's this, for lack of a better term, fish out of water, crashes
Yeah.
on this country, doesn't know the language, so it's very little English, a whole lot of Japanese that you have to try to catch the subtitles. Production value is tremendous. Just the stuff that is clearly CGI looks good, doesn't look like it's done on a green screen or something. It was definitely something I will continue watching to the end of the season. It's just, I thought it was very well done.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I've seen positive reviews.
Yeah,
I've seen comparisons to Game of Thrones. Were we
yeah,
the first ones to compare it to Game of Thrones? Probably not, but
probably
we
not.
did. But people now who have seen it are comparing it to Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
And yeah, I've checked it. I mean, it definitely looks like an epic story, and
it
people are saying
is.
it's good. And
It is, and it's one of those where it's not like the first episode ended on a cliffhanger or this big, oh, I've got to scroll into this. It just was such a good story. You just want to keep diving into the story and learning more about it, even though I don't know the first thing about, the spice trade through Japan in the early 1600s, right? I know nothing about that, but I want to know more now.
more about it. Well, it also seems like a lot of people are watching it,
Yeah.
and so like maybe I want to be part of the conversation. Which I was reading this last summer. There was this interview with Bill Hader, and it was a really great interview. I forget where it was published, but he was talking about being younger, and one of his friends wanted to go see some movie, and he didn't really want to see that movie, and so I was like, "You got to be part of the conversation." Bill Hader's like, "I don't want to be a part of the conversation." I think that attitude on his part carries forward.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't see Bill Hader as a part of the conversation, whatever. I respect that. Um, I mentioned watching The Floor. It was the finale of The Floor. Have you checked out the
Yes.
show at all as of
I
this
haven't
point?
watched it yet. Is there anyone left on the floor? They've all fallen through. What's the
You can binge it now. Note to everyone out there, perhaps if you're watching on Hulu as I did, they billed this last week's episode as a 2-hour season finale, and it was, except Hulu split it into two episodes and tried to show me the second one first. Be careful out there.
oh,
Um,
ooh,
yeah, we'll start watching the second one
that's not
here.
good.
Spoilers. Um, I caught it in time though. It was pretty good. I was I wasn't the happiest with who won. No offense to the person who won the floor. And I felt like maybe a couple people made some strategic mistakes, so you
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
a little bit of that vicarious frustration. Like, why'd you do that? But anyway, it's a good show, and I do
This
recommend
is
it.
something, because strategic game show, that's my wheelhouse. So that I really enjoy those. So I do have to just spend the weekend and plow through this thing.
Yeah, so they're at the point where they have to decide who to challenge or what category to play. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I think a
Okay.
couple of times it was like, you made the wrong decision, as opposed to, when they're actually doing the trivia contest. Well,
Yeah.
you get things wrong, whatever, you get things wrong, you don't know it, but the strategic decisions, yeah. Beyond that, I've been watching The Daily Show, and I was going to mention this because I know I said on here before, we both tuned in for Jon Stewart's first
Mhm.
Monday, and then I noted that I proceeded to not watch it the rest of the week. I've been watching I felt bad. I've been watching the other hosts. Yeah, have you watched them at all?
No, I will admit I've seen 3 Jon Stewart episodes and not 1 second more since he came back.
Yeah. Well, it's just I think kind of fair, but
Yeah.
I mean, part of me was like, I want to see how these people are doing. Are they auditioning for the gig? I
Yeah.
think they are at some
Yeah.
level. They're giving each of them the full rest of the week, right? So they're not rotating day by day, but it's like Jon Stewart and Jordan Klepper for the rest of the week, for example. And also, I guess, Comedy Central's nefarious plan worked, and they kind of sucked me back into
Hmm.
this old habit I used to have 10 years ago of watching The Daily Show every day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I certainly don't blame you. I probably should tune in more than just on Monday nights, but he's just, I don't know, he's just been so good. Episode 2 in particular, where he goes in on Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, was just I mean, I was
No, that was pretty
waking
good.
people up in my house because I was laughing so much.
That was pretty good. Like, Tucker Carlson's ever been to a grocery store before.
Yeah.
Um, but I wouldn't say that you should. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not. And I've been skipping the interviews for the most part.
Yeah, no,
Like
I
watching it on Paramount Plus. I'll let the person that they're interviewing go for 30 seconds. I'm like, I don't care.
yeah.
And apologies to the guests. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That is a wrinkle I got to thinking though about with streaming as opposed to cable. Back in the day when I was watching the Daily Show on cable,
Hmm.
I always watched the interviews.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know what I mean? There was no way to easily skip them. And I just, of course, I'm going to watch the whole episode, let the interview
Yeah.
go. I want the moment of Zen at the end. Um, but I'm sitting here watching on Paramount Plus, and then what's funny is I watch the moment of Zen, like I want that.
I do exactly the same thing.
Unless an interview seems interesting from the beginning, so
Yeah.
come out and
No,
get
it's
to it.
it's been nice to get back into that sort of, as you said, sort of a comfort zone with that after a lot of years of not being there.
Yeah, Jon Stewart's been doing good,
Yeah.
and his dog died, and that was sad. I don't know if you
Yeah,
saw
that
that.
was a very good, very
We
sad
don't need
segment.
no need to dwell on that, but yeah, pulling on the heartstrings. All right. Well, I guess you want to get to Constellation.
Yeah, we might as well. I mean, we're gonna do our best with this episode. There's a lot to get through, so let's dive in.
All right. So this is your spoiler warning for Constellation episode 4. After a brief musical interlude, we'll pop in here. We're going to dig into the episode with all spoilers on the table for everything up through episode 4 of Constellation, and we'll see you on the other side.
Okay, welcome back. We are diving into Constellation, episode 4, titled "The Left Hand of God," written by Peter Harness, directed by Oliver Hirschspiegel, same writer and director as a couple of episodes that we talked about last week. I have Cameron, have about 9,000 words here as a summary of this episode, but I'm going to try to truncate it as much as possible.
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah. We don't need a play-by-play.
yeah. Joe, our main character, Joe, her life is, I mean, just falling apart because there are things she doesn't remember about her marriage. There are things that happened before, from when she was in space, with affairs between her husband, her daughter can't remember her Swedish. Joe all of a sudden knows how to play the piano. She didn't know how to do that, but think she knew how to do that before. So things are just completely in chaos as she tries to sort out what's going on here. She eventually goes to some counseling, and they prescribe her lithium pills, which she understands is an antipsychotic. But through some investigation, she learns that these lithium pills that she's been prescribed that she does not want to take, because she does not want to think that she is crazy in any way, is the same thing that she has been prescribed as daily pills to take when she got back from this trip. She does some investigating, learning that there are a small number of astronauts that have experienced these similar things that she has, and they have been categorized and tried to be, I don't know, tried to be put back on the right path by these pills and by some of these things that they're doing. She confronts Henry Caldera about this, and he explains that there's a phenomenon called the left hand of God that some of these astronauts have experienced to fly in very high altitudes. None of this seems to help because the home life continues to deteriorate. Her husband, Magnus, thinks that she needs to go into a facility that can help her recover. They argue and fight over this. Joe knocks Magnus down. We don't see him get back up. We don't know his fate. But what we do know is that some marine observatory in Denmark sent Joe a package with transcripts and recordings of the lost conversations when she was in space, and of conversations seemingly from a female cosmonaut that might have been the one that died that Joe saw in space. Cabin scenes in this episode are with Magnus and Alice, different from the first 3 episodes that were with Joe and Alice. All that leads toward this ending of a very ominous painting that exists in their cabin in the woods. We got a heavy dose of quantum physics in this one. We got a heavy dose of, are we in different realities, different timelines, different universes? With all of that, where should we go?
Yeah, indeed, because you didn't hit on everything. You hardly talked about Henry or Bud. Kind of a lot here. Then let's start with the opening scene, insofar as it seemed clear to me that this is an alternate reality. I mean, of course, that already seemed fairly clear through the first 3 episodes, but if you think about the fact that we're getting an opening scene where Magnus is taking Alice to the cabin, and at the end he tells her something like, "Don't worry, you're never going to see her again," presumably referring to Joe. There's no way that's in the same world as the other cabin scenes, at least.
Yeah, can't be. And it does harken back to some of our conversations from last week of, are we being fed this information that there's a timeline where Joe died, and has not come back, and there's a timeline where maybe the Joe that was supposed to die actually ended up in another timeline. I know I'm going off a tangent already here, but just sort of, how did you read the fact that there are now 2 sets of cabin scenes?
Well, what I find particularly interesting as a question here is that for the most part, other than this opening scene and scenes where step back. Okay. For the most part, we've been within Joe's perspective in this show. And if called for, we could refer to her as our Joe, right? Because apparently there were other ones, right? There are strong indications in this episode that our Joe has taken the place of a Joe who didn't die in space. I don't know exactly how to put this together. If that gets at it, but regardless, mostly it's been from her perspective, at least when she's around. But when she's not around, in this opening scene, it's clearly an alternate reality from the opening cabin scenes in previous episodes. And then I start wondering, well, how many worlds are we seeing in the other scenes in this show? Perhaps in particular the ones that Joe isn't in. You following me?
Yeah, that's one of my essential questions as well. Is I take it as the opening scene with Magnus and Alice in the cabin is clearly separate from our called our prime timeline, the one that we were introduced to with Joe. Some version of Joe is alive. It's not the one that maybe she's supposed to be in. It's sort of our prime timeline that we're following. I think my impression is that we are introduced to Magnus and Alice in at least a secondary timeline, but which may not be the only one, right? Because we're introduced to some things later that
Yeah.
hint at others that might exist. And again, these are, yeah, and I think that's part of my confusion here is are these timelines, are these universes, are these realities, are they all the same? Is that all mean the same thing? What are we being introduced to here? I think this concept of, again, they keep going back to explaining these experiments, what it looks like, and what that means for matter in two places at the same point. Just sort of what exactly are we dealing with here, and does that matter?
Yeah, I mean, well, narratively, it matters insofar as there's a question of how this is going to hang together and how we understand it. Whether it's like, again, as I said last week, I'm just going to keep saying when this comes up about quantum mechanics, I don't care if they're getting the science right because they aren't. Like at some level, they aren't. I mean, I know just enough to know that if you really, got some quantum physicists in the conversation, they could poke holes and, have complaints and all of that. But I think they are pretty clearly playing on what's called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, as others have in fiction as well, and taking that at a macro level that there are potentially infinite versions of reality, which you could also approach just at the level of kind of philosophical thought experiment.
Yeah.
Like potentially at any given moment you're making a choice, you could have made another choice, and so you could split that off into an infinite number of realities if you take the line that there is a reality in which every possible choice is made.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're quite going that far,
Yeah.
but it does seem clear they're playing with that kind of many worlds thing. And then there's a strong suggestion that maybe the Cal device did something to kind of, I don't know, puncture the barriers between the realities.
I'm glad you brought this up because it and I don't know necessarily how far we're going to go down this one specific path at this point, but it confused me that so we see Joe, she's in the European Space Agency offices, she's looking at the medical records, she's dissecting the pills to see what's in them. She sees this version of Henry, whatever version that is, and whatever it is that he's supposed to be trying to convey to her. And then she goes into this office, but she's in an office while men are trying to clean it out. And so it sort of talks about to what you're referencing there, this barrier might be sort of flimsy right then of where she is versus where she's supposed to be, or the other version of where she's supposed to be, because these men are there cleaning out an office because in that timeline or in that universe, she has died. Okay.
Right.
And that makes sense to me, right? Because she's experienced this left hand of God. She has gone through this experience. Something has happened to her. But then I can justify that. But then I can't justify why is someone like Alice seeing things, or is the barrier that's sort of become transparent now something where everyone is exposed to that? Everyone can sort of see between these realities. How can Alice see a version where her mother has died, Paul has not, other people are there in her house? I just couldn't, I guess, square that circle, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Because with regard to Joe, I mentioned the Cal device, but it does seem like there's something broader that maybe pre-exists the Cal device with Henry, perhaps Irina, perhaps some of these other people she finds in the records, other people Henry mentions when he's talking about the left hand of God. And I liked how he mentioned Laika. This is the dog the Russians sent into space.
Yes.
And he has a whiteboard, right? And one of the things on the whiteboard is death in space.
Death in space. Yep.
The other one I think is like stress trauma or something, and then for some reason he circled lithium-7. Okay, that's interesting to think about because it kind of seems like lithium-7 is a treatment for the condition that they're giving people. But then how does it fit on the whiteboard where it would seem like the whiteboard is speculating about the cause?
Yeah, this is one of my off the wall conspiracy theories, is that someone or something is behind some sort of mission to propagate or push forward this being able to go between worlds or realities or timelines, and the lithium helps them do that. It doesn't ground them, it doesn't bring them back to reality, but that actually pushes things forward because of what they've been exposed to, right? It's just a random thought, but it could be.
That's an interesting possibility. That would actually fit a lot better with Henry's whiteboard.
Yeah.
So like maybe death in space is the initial cause.
Mm-hmm.
One version of you dies in space, or something like this, and you end up somehow though taking the place of a version of you who did not die in space. And that's interesting, the suggestion that the lithium is intended to.
But that also could come back to your question of a choice or a decision or something that had to have been determined. One side of the choice led to death, one did not. And so is someone or something or someone trying to get back to a moment where, we see a sort of trope all the time. Oh, if I could only get back and change things, I could get back to what I had before, or the life I had before. Does something happen to someone? It's Irina, the female cosmonaut. If it's someone else, I'm trying to find the way to get back to the life I had before.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back to those scenes with Joe struggling to fix the pod and all of that, if you think about how all of that played out, she died.
Yeah.
That's where I'm landing at this point. Right? Our Joe was trying to, fix the pod. There were multiple indications that she didn't really have enough time. Then the latches malfunctioned and so on and so forth. And then we saw her like, oh, she finally did it and got through. So I think my theory here is that somewhere in there, our Joe did manage to get back to Earth, but it jumped universes, jumped realities, somewhere in there. And I mean, actually, the strongest scene that suggests itself is when she's back on Earth, though, when she's in the helicopter. If you recall that scene, where it's like,
reality is sort of jumping back and forth in there. Yep.
So I don't know. Hopefully, there's going to be more information in the back half of the season here.
Yeah. That's an important point to bring out. We're halfway done with this season already, right?
Apparently, yeah. That's 8-episode season. We're halfway there, And are there going to be more seasons after this? I don't know. Is there going to be space for more seasons? We don't know. Well, personally, we haven't watched the whole season yet. So
so with all the questions that exist, there were, I thought, quite a few answers given in this episode. The idea of multiple astronauts going through this, the idea of what the pills are, so several things that seems like we got this recordings of what might have happened to the cosmonaut. We got some real exposition about the experiment. The right amount of information flowing through this episode, like giving too much away, giving too much through what we need to know versus what needs to remain a mystery at this point. Like a lot of stuff, we know what the pills are. We know what the cosmonaut said. We know what the experiment does. We know what has been observed. We know potentially that there's a reality where Joe died and one where she didn't. Or sort of, did we get the right amount of information here, or there's just so much we have to do that we have to make sure we're giving, trickling some of it out each episode?
I mean, I liked it, presuming we can trust the creators of the show to have enough going on in the next 4 episodes at least, to close out one solid season. And then who knows? Probably they want to do more than that. Generally, people do, but maybe not. With the lithium, I kind of like. I mean, it's interesting to me that it's lithium.
Yeah.
For one thing, I was kind of surprised that they were telling us so immediately what the pills were,
Yes. Me
right?
too.
Because we talked about that at some length last week. But to take that latter point first, I kind of like that, because they're not holding these pills up as some great mystery that's going to be central to, but rather like, no, it's just lithium. And the fact that it's lithium, that is a completely existing thing in the world that people do and take, they take it. Lithium 7, I was doing a little research. Apparently, it's like the most abundant isotope of lithium on Earth.
Okay.
So it's like this isn't some rare, weird thing. Um, Not really,
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make of that. It actually does create another question around it because it is a common element, as it were. Um, The other stuff, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's still a whole lot of questions here. It does seem
Yeah.
strongly indicated that the one version of Joe died, you know. But related to that, I think your question is a very good one that the show owes us an answer to.
Yeah.
How is Alice seeing the memorial
Yeah.
for the dead Joe, where Paul is there? By the way, Paul didn't die.
Right.
So that's a wrinkle in what I said earlier, because our Joe's Paul died, right? So I don't know. Maybe I was wrong before.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm glad you brought that up because that to me could introduce an idea of even a third reality, a third timeline, because what we're just discussing is Joe dies long after Paul did and everything that we've seen, right? If we assume it's while she's trying to repair the
Right.
escape capsule, while she's trying to land on Earth, and something in that capacity, she dies. But that's a day or two after Paul died. And yet we see a reality where Joe is dead, but Paul is at the funeral. So, yeah, again, even beyond how Alice can see that, does that then introduce another reality that we have to sort of bake into this equation here?
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned many worlds theory before. I mean, one possibility is that Constellation will conceptually go that far
Mm-hmm.
as a way to not have to count the number of realities. You following me here?
Yeah, yeah,
Like if the conceptual answer is it's infinite,
yeah. It doesn't matter.
well,
Yeah,
then we don't need to actually like count so much as, and try to figure out how the narrative hangs together or what have you. But yeah, it is a real question about Alice because there are, I think, indications. We think about Henry's whiteboard again. We think about some of the stuff that Bud said about Apollo 18. We think about the dead cosmonaut in space being Irina, who we've
mm,
also seen alive on Earth. One of the things on his whiteboard is death in space. So, like, one possibility would be that okay, there are infinite versions of all of us, but if one of those versions of you dies in space, weird stuff happens.
yeah,
Not really like scientifically plausible, but maybe that's one possibility of where we're going, right? One version of you died in space, and that short circuits your experience of metaphysical reality in some way, and now you're kind of you know in between, living in this liminal space between worlds. I don't know, but Alice didn't die in space.
exactly. And that's why, there's also the what sort of the common sci-fi trope of we tried to take 2 steps, but we actually got 100 out of it. Like we opened up a box that we shouldn't have. We invented Skynet to protect us, and then it ends up destroying us, right? So this idea that you're trying to just accomplish one thing, something, find one piece of matter that's in 2 states at the same time, and you end up opening a door to an infinite number of ways that matter can exist.
Yeah. See, now, but I do think at this point that the primary phenomenon here pre-exists the cow device. And Henry's trying to figure it out with the cow device or something like that. Of everything we've seen, then it continues to feel to me like the stuff we see between the stuff with Henry, the stuff with Bud, thinking about whether they're versions of the same person or what have you, almost feels like that has the potential to be the most fruitful space where we're going to start getting some answers.
Yeah.
And we get more here because Henry is talking to, I don't know, himself on a computer, or it's Jonathan Banks wearing glasses.
Yeah.
Is that Bud? Is that a third one? How
Mm-hmm.
many, how many are there? And so on. What did you think on
I
that?
think we're might be knocking on the door of what the right, not what the right answer is, but sort of what they're going towards, which is that we have no concept of how many paths they've opened up to different realities or universes. And is it just three? Well, what would be the reason why it would be just three? Why is it not just this infinite number? And that is you're trying to get something to get you to the one where you were before. It's a fruitless effort because you're just going to find yourself in another one that has, that you don't belong in or that you weren't a part of before.
Yeah. But see, also, if we're down this path with Henry, there seems to be the possibility that what happened after Apollo 18 is multiple versions of him ended up in the same reality. That would be different than what happened to Joe.
Yeah.
Right. I think, unless not, maybe there is another Joe in our primary reality somewhere or
Yeah.
something like that. If that's right about Henry, though, and Bud, it might also be the case with Irina. So I want to call your attention and our listeners' attention to the scene from episode 2, where they are trying to communicate with Joe on the ISS. And this is the point where the communication fails and they can no longer hear her.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As that's going on, someone, maybe it's Michaela, maybe it's someone else, like Henry assistant of some kind, comes and informs him that he has a phone call from Skagerrak Marine Observatory.
Yes.
And Irina makes a face at that. Like, Skagerrak? And he's like, don't give me any, don't give me a hard time or whatever. That's how it plays. I think it's more facial expressions than anything. And then he asks her how her sister's doing.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I think she's dead, something like that. And then she asks him about his brother. He says, we haven't spoken in years, thank God. And then we cut to Bud.
Yeah.
And there is nothing in there to tell us whether he took the call from Skagerrak.
Correct.
Okay. But here in episode 4, Joe gets the package in the mail with the cassette tapes from Skagerrak Marine Observatory.
Mm-hmm.
And the one cassette tape of her from October 15th is from the day, and presumably more precisely the time I was referring to there in episode 2.
Yeah.
So it seems to indicate to me that Henry did not take that call. And if he had, they could have heard her because Skagerrak was hearing her.
Yeah, I like that theory because what I think my initial surface level observation of that was, oh, there's somebody who knows what's going on, and they are, they sort of want to be the fly in the ointment of this whole thing. And here's what can expose, the grand conspiracy of what's of what's happening. But it does seem like there's sort of a deeper thing where all of this is connected back to what happened to Henry, what happened to Irina, what happened to the versions of themselves that whatever it is that they went through. I guess, and I also want to ask you this related to that same point. So we sort of see this series of astronauts, Henry, Joe, the one who saw the angels, the one that attacked their family, these people that have had these issues, but there's nothing in there about an Irina. Is that because she is Russian, she's a cosmonaut, that records wouldn't be in there, or some other explanation when she's looking through the records? I just took it as, well, Russian cosmonaut records wouldn't be in this data set or whatever.
I might have to revisit that. You mean when she's looking at the records? In my memory, I feel like I remember seeing Irina's name in there, but maybe I
may have
did that.
Yeah, maybe
Maybe I
I
just expected
completely,
it to be in
yeah,
there.
because I only remember the one who saw angels and the one who attacked their family. Again, that's a point we're gonna have to check before next time, I guess. But
Yeah, well, I'll call it up and double check that, because I mean, it would only have been visually
yeah,
on the list, not something that was further, elaborated on.
right.
But I'm trying to look back at that, because you're right. If she's not there, that might also be interesting to note.
Hmm.
These other people who are there, who are on categorized as B,
B,
you
yeah.
know, presumably they're all being given lithium instead of B vitamins. Also, are they going to enter our story in any way? Like, are we gonna actually see them? Is Joe gonna look them up? These are possibilities, I suppose.
Yeah, I would
Um,
theory that they start appearing in some way throughout this story.
but then Skagerrak, look, I mean, in terms of part of what you were saying, there are strong indications that they are, I don't know what, on the other side in one way or another, because, well, Irina scoffs at their name in episode 2, but also, maybe even more importantly, they've sent her a tape of a Russian cosmonaut dying in space in 1967, who
Exactly.
was a woman.
Exactly.
And throughout the hearing, everyone insisted no Russian cosmonauts ever died in space.
Yeah.
Ever. Could
Yeah.
not possibly be the explanation.
We've
It must have
opened up
been a trash
all the
can.
confidential records. We can show you. No one is, we promise you, these are all the records. No one died in space.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe Skagerrak's been out there and they have recordings from what Denmark's some special ability to record space. I don't know. And maybe they have recordings of various things, and the international community at large doesn't give them credence, right? So
Yeah.
Henry's not going to take their call, because you can't give any credibility to this organization that's out there saying, hey, we have a tape of Irina dying in space. And everyone would go, are you insane? She's right there, alive, right?
Yeah.
So, how they're going to factor into this is interesting. And they planted the seed in episode 2. It was pretty quick.
Yeah.
I look
To bring
back
it
at
back
my
was interesting. A have no doubt that this is not a marine observatory, and B, have no doubt this is not in Denmark. So what they actually are, we're gonna find out.
yeah, well, we'll see. Also doing research, you can read my recap as well if people have been writing on each episode, and there's some of these details in there. The first man to die on a space flight was a Russian cosmonaut.
Mhm.
Um,
Good pull there, because I sort of like that juxtaposition of there's the reality that happened, and there's the things that they say never happened on this show. They talk about Apollo 18, Russian cosmonauts never dying, all these different things that we can point to that are discrepancies. And do that just because this is a piece of fiction, or is it because we are now on sort of a really thin barrier between different realities?
right, yeah. So clearly, I mean, like, you could just say, well, the primary world of this story is not the world that we're living in right
Yeah.
now. Okay, but there's clearly a lot going on here to think about. And I do think that's a big question about Alice. I'm glad you mentioned that,
Yeah.
because she very clearly sees and has a sense of something being off with her mother even
Yeah.
before that. what's going on there. And you want to talk about the painting a little bit? You noted the title here.
Yeah, so just want to get your thoughts and if there's anything you can draw from me what this is. All this episode ends again in the cabin, just a pan shot towards this painting. It's a painting by Hugo Simberg from 1897. It's called The Poor Devil by the Fire, The Devil by the Pot. And there's all sorts of speculation online what what this could mean and why we're seeing this. Sort of see
So
what you think about it.
my first question, Ryan, and this may not be of interest to anyone listening. Where did you learn that this was what the painting was?
This is just sleuthing online, just trying to find has anyone found out where this was. I certainly didn't know it ahead of time, but there's some
But it
Reddit
was people were
things.
talking about Constellation, and you
Yes,
directly,
yes,
yeah, okay.
yes.
Because I tried to figure out what the painting was before the episode aired, and I came up short.
Yeah.
I
No,
took a screenshot of it. I put it in Google Lens. No.
it was only
Um,
by benefit of we were recording this 2 days after the episode
yeah.
aired.
So that's good. I put the screenshot in my recap, but I was like, I don't know what this is. So Hugo Simberg, looking into him a little bit, kind of an interesting figure. I did notice in relation to what we're talking about that perhaps his most famous painting is called The Wounded Angel,
Oh,
which
interesting.
was the
Okay.
title, I think, of episode 2 of Constellation.
Yes, that's right.
So are
Oh my
there
gosh, what if this whole theme is Hugo Simberg and sort of a retelling of his life? That would be the
we kind of
my doors.
do we get we probably should get an art historian on here and really dig into what's going on with Hugo Simberg's work.
Yeah,
Um, Devil by the Fire, Devil. I don't have a lot to say about this. I mean, I appreciate the painting personally.
yeah, yeah. My
Um,
favorite theory I saw online was this painting, which again we there's a screenshot of it in Cameron's piece. You can go find it online. Is that there's this sort of emasculated, almost bony, thin version of the devil standing holding a pot near a fire, and the theory is that sort of the devil is starving, and what they're doing with these experiments is feeding him. That this is just pure evil that we're opening the doors to by doing these experiments. So why that painting would be hung up in the cabins, who knows? I want some more, I don't know, happier things in my vacation homes, but to each their own, I guess.
yeah. Another question is, and look, one of the things I appreciated about this show is that it leads me to questions like this, even if I wish I'd actually done what I'm about to say before we recorded, which I didn't do. In the previous cabin scenes, was that painting there?
Yeah, I have no
You know,
idea.
I'm not sure. They really call our attention to it here. Um, but it's a possibility that maybe it was a different painting in the
Yeah.
other ones. I don't know. I'd have to double check, and I haven't done that. Unfortunately, I should have done
Each
that.
reality has a Hugo Simberg painting in it in the cabin.
Maybe, maybe
Who
the host
knows?
one's Francis Bacon. Totally different world. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
no other thoughts beyond that. There are interesting theories out there, and this seems like something that maybe we'll get a sense of why or where this painting is or what it means before we're done. But it's certainly I don't know. There are other mysteries I'd rather solve first.
yeah, maybe keep an eye on the paintings.
Yep.
Definitely worth noting here. And yeah, where's this all going to go? To what extent is it going to be playing with quantum mechanics? Clearly, it is. To what extent is it going to hop over into metaphysics of a
Yep.
more spiritual nature? Is it going to be devil stuff and God stuff in here? It's possible.
Yeah.
You we'll see, but I don't know. I'm enjoying the show. I think there's a lot to dig into here, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk it all through with you here each week. And I hope people enjoy listening.
Yeah. I'm enjoying going through this. It's one of these where I have no concept of where we're going, but I like the journey that we're on. So we have at least 4 more to go. So looking forward to doing that.
Cool. So I think that about does it for this week. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up?
I think we've touched on what I need to.
All right, sounds good. So we'll be back next week. Talk about Constellation episode 5. In the meantime, you can read my recap of this week's episode on TVObsessive.com. Check out other stuff on there. Follow us on social media at TV Obsessive, on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Mastodon. I never check the Mastodon. And Threads. I've been posting articles on Threads. Basically, with those, you're just gonna get the articles posted there if you want to, see it on your social media when we publish something and so on. Check out the YouTube channel, like and subscribe there, and all of that. And I think that about does it. So we'll be back next week for Constellation episode 5.
All right, really looking forward to that. We will see you next time.